Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Dyer and welcome to Colorado Inside Out on this Friday, February the 16th. We have a lot to discuss this week, so let me get right to introducing you to our panel. Patty Calhoun, founder and editor of Westward. David Kopel, research director at the Independence Institute, as well as Eric Sonderman, columnist for Colorado Politics and the Colorado Springs and Denver Gazettes, and Tyrone Glover, a leading civil rights and criminal defense attorney here in Denver. We are starting with a topic that no one likes to talk about, but we have to, taxes. And it looks like all of us could be voting again about what to do about our property taxes, Patty.
Well, voting after we scream. I'm sure other people were in the same situation I was this week when you went, opened your envelope and found it wasn't even the 17% that was predicted or the 30. In my case, it's 40. And you know my situation where my roof failed. So I basically have an inhabitable house with high property taxes, with high Xfinity rates, with high Excel. And you just think this is going to really affect people at the ballot box. If these proposals, if the proposal coming from Advanced Colorado and Colorado Concern, not to be confused with Colorado Commies, I mean, it's not a surprise. These guys would be working together. If that proposal makes it to the ballot in November, I think people will do almost anything for the guarantee that their property taxes will be cut. I mean, I don't know about other municipalities as much as Denver, but you're still looking at costs for trash, new things that were added, cost for residential parking, things that are added and people feel like they're being nickeled and dimed and hundreded to death.
Absolutely. A lot of people do. We all do. David.
Well, one thing that would mitigate some of that would be for the Colorado state government to stop collecting more income tax than it's entitled to spend. And Governor Polis has spoken many times in a very articulate way about how harmful income taxes are to the economy in general, and especially for families who are trying to start a small business. So what he says is, when the state's income tax is bringing in more revenue than the state's allowed to spend by our Constitution, you should cut the income tax by that amount. And instead, the Democrats in control of the legislature say, no, we want to overcollect, and then we will give back, sort of, the money by handouts to special interests through special tax benefits for them.
There was a proposal to cut income tax, and that went nowhere in the legislature this week.
That's right, and I don't think you saw Governor Polis's team of lobbyists down there trying to twist arms and build supports for it. He says the right thing and then does nothing.
David is absolutely right on this particular issue. Jared Polis loves on an annual basis to sort of burnish his quote-unquote libertarian credentials, or at least to fancy himself the libertarian by talking about ultimately getting income taxes to zero. And then he exerts no political capital, expends no political capital whatsoever to make it happen. Not a phone call, not a twisted arm, none of it. On property taxes, I'm with Patty. We received our bills in the past week. I'm not pleading poverty here. We're fortunate. We do own a second home up in Grand County. In Denver, the tax bill went up close to 45%. In Grand County, it went up close to 50%. Those are astounding numbers. And for a whole lot of Coloradans who have already been badly damaged by inflation over 2 to 3 years, I mean, this is a giant step. My prediction is, as more and more people get these tax bills, property taxes are going to be the hot political issue. This will not be the last time we're talking about this issue around this table. In fact, I predict it's going to be a fairly regular subject.
Okay, you ready for that? All right. Tyrone.
Yeah, we're in an affordability crisis, and the one, I think, encouraging thing is we're seeing folks from opposite ends of political spectrums coming in, trying to strike a balance, trying to figure out how we can make things more affordable while still funding our education and emergency services, teachers and firefighters, really trying to make sure that there's a balance between economy and equity. And so, if there's a silver lining here, unlike a number of issues that I think we're probably going to talk about today, this seems to be one that is uniting folks rather than dividing them.
Didn't I see this week, too, that Colorado is one of the worst places for first-time home buyers? or that there aren't a lot of people trying to get their first homes here, something to that effect.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing multiple, I think, quarters, and I think it just came out showing that home ownership is on the decline, and we're seeing much more renting and people opting to rent. And so I think that is the going trend until we see something otherwise.
Yeah, okay. This week at the state legislature, a proposal was introduced to ban new oil and gas drilling in Colorado in 6 years, in 2030. David's sponsors say this is necessary because of climate change and the environmental health impacts on people. This is a huge industry for our state. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
In every state and every time and place, there have always been doomsday nuts. In the 1960s, you had very prestigious people saying that mass global starvation was a certainty within the next few years because of population growth. 100% wrong. And then in the 70s, we got, catastrophic global cooling is just around the corner, and then that didn't happen. Man-made global warming is a real thing, but it's a tiny thing compared to the natural cycles of climate variation. Abundant energy is the most important material input for human health and for human thriving, but there are some people who, for their own crazy pseudo-religious views, think of that as immoral. And this Priola bill will wipe out natural gas, which is one of the cleanest and best sources of abundant energy.
There is no doubt that there is man-made climate change happening. There is also no doubt that renewables in various forms are the wave of the future. But that future is not between now and 2030 in all or nothing black or white terms. This is an all or nothing black or white bill. It lacks any subtlety. It lacks any appreciation for the rate of manageable change. It lacks any recognition for the role of oil and gas as an industry, as part of Colorado's economy, the number of households that are dependent on it. I assume this will be killed. Governor Polis does not want to see this on his desk. He does not want, he knows better than to sign this bill, but he does not want to be put in a position with Democratic constituency groups who worship at this altar of casting a veto for it. So I would assume they will see that this never sees the governor's desk. I would hope so.
This bill, to me, seems more like a frustration with the session after session lack of proactive solutions coming forward to address what is a crisis. This is not something that is hypothetical. We're seeing weather events like we've never seen before. We're breaking record after record, year after year. I was just up in Juneau, Alaska, and saw the Mendenhall Glacier, which has receded just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards back and is a scintilla of what it used to be. This is real. This is here, and something needs to be done about it. And we're not seeing anything proactively coming in from the critics, right? And so now we have this very ambitious bill. To me, this is sort of a shot fired over the bow. Eventually, one of these things is going to get through unless we all come together, unlike the last topic, and actually come up with something that's common sense and makes sense for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Patty.
Well, to play off another thing Tyrone said, affordability is such an issue now. So that's one thing that is going to help this bill go down, which is people cannot afford all renewable energy yet. We're not there with the industry, as Eric said. That's more in the future. We can push to that goal, but we're not there by 2030. And if energy is more expensive, we're not willing to give up the things we plug in. We're not ready to give up our cars yet. And that's going to be one of the big issues is how much can we afford to pay for? But the other thing is there is a will. This week, Colorado College released its annual Conservation in the West poll, and for the first time in 14 years since the poll began, residents of the Rocky Mountains, and especially Coloradans, are concerned about water shortages. The majority are concerned, more than have ever been concerned before. Definitely climate change. So the question is, how much of that is just lip service, and how much are people willing to pay in order to protect the climate?
Let's discuss again the migrant situation. It is an issue that keeps evolving every week, every day. We're seeing informational meetings in local communities about migrants. We are also seeing misinformation about migrants. And then let's also discuss what is actually happening. I'll start with you, Eric.
Well, there's a lot here. Speaking of those meetings, Kyle, we saw meetings in Lakewood and in Colorado Springs. There was an ugliness to some of these meetings. We're dealing with real people, real lives. They need to be dealt with compassion. They've gone through hell to get out of where they were living. They've gone through hell to get here. That does not mean our country has an unlimited carrying capacity. I've written about this many times. We have to get control of our borders. A sovereign nation has to determine who comes in to that country. And then you get the whole thing of how Mike Johnston has announced, whether it's DMV offices closing 1 week a month, no flowers in city parks and rec center hours being cut back, all as part of budget cuts. And I think what you're seeing going on in the Lakewoods and Colorado Springs of the world is going to start bleeding into Denver. Yes, Denver has a more quote-unquote progressive or liberal-minded electorate, but just as Denver now has a new director of newcomer services, there are a whole lot of old-timers in Denver who think maybe there should be a director of old-timer services, and those being preserved and safeguarded and restored.
And all those meetings made national news as well.
Exactly.
Tyrone.
We need sustainable solutions, not scapegoating. It was so beautiful, the initial reaction to the newcomers when our communities really rallied around, and however they could support, they did. It was a time of unity. It was a time of folks coming together, and it's just such a shame, and I'm so disheartened to see politicians trying to use this issue now as a way to divide us in a time when we need to be coming together around our values. I agree, there are systematic issues which are now really, I think, coming to bear because of the pressure on the systems like the border, like our healthcare system. But now is not the time to divide. Now is the time to come together and come up with solutions that work for everybody, old-timers and newcomers.
Hi.
Well, you have a lot of misinformation out there, which is one of the issues. Say at the Lakewood meeting where there was the whole rumor that an empty school was going to house migrants and Lakewood was in cahoots with Denver. So we have a tough enough situation without misinformation. And there's certainly plenty of that going along. And you talk about scapegoating. It's true that in the beginning it was really interesting how people who maybe weren't interested in helping those experiencing homelessness definitely stepped up for the migrants, recognizing the sacrifices they'd gone through to get here, the families that had come, the lives they'd left behind. But now as the cuts come and are affecting the residents of Denver, you begin to see that there is a schism in people who want theirs and the people who want to help. We did a story about one woman who brought her 2 kids and her dog, 8 countries, walked through, and someone had sheltered her dog while the woman was in shelter, and now she can't get her dog back. And I can tell you, we haven't had as much response to a story in years as to this migrant dog. I would like to see as much attention paid to the migrants themselves, but it's an issue that is really dividing the city.
It is. David.
So sanctuary was an old-time European legal concept where if you were, the sheriff was trying to arrest you for some violent crime like a murder, if you could hot-foot it and get into a church before the sheriff or his deputies grabbed you, then you could claim sanctuary in the church. And what that usually meant is you'd have to go into exile, but you'd presumably be thinking that was a better deal than getting hanged or going to prison. Now we've got sanctuary coming back in a new kind of way. The idea of sanctuary cities and sanctuary states started with unlawful immigrants, but it's been copied and applied to lots of other issues like drug laws or gun laws and all kinds of topics. But whatever the topic is, if some local government declares that it is a sanctuary for X, then there's going to be more X in that jurisdiction. And so what the people of every municipality in Colorado are thinking about right now is looking at the practical experience of Denver as a sanctuary city.
This week brought the 1-year mark of when Luis Garcia was shot and killed leaving East High School. The case remains unsolved. There was a shooting inside a mega church in Texas, a mass shooting at the Chiefs' Super Bowl victory parade, and a drive-by outside the downtown aquarium in the middle of the day here in Denver on Wednesday. Tyrone, I know there are more bills going through the legislature, but there's another sense of frustration among a lot of people.
There isn't, and my heart goes out to Luis's family. I think the saying "justice delayed is justice denied" definitely applies here. But hopefully there is some light and some hope. My understanding is that they're presenting a case which normally means there's at least a suspect, but whether there's probable cause to charge will be determined. We need to continue to try to make our communities safer, despite what are perceived as some of the judicial hurdles we're going to now need to clear. There's common sense solutions. We need to come together and we need to advance those. And the folks that are pushing back and are trying to kill a number of the bills that are working their way through the session, maybe they need to put something forward, and maybe they need to come up with some of these solutions instead of just trying to kill everything that the other sides are trying to advance.
Patty?
Well, the good news is that actually violent crime is down in downtown Denver and in Denver in general, but down still isn't down enough. We're going to see an explosion around the country now after the Super Bowl shootings, just as we did after the Nuggets championship. This is the kind of thing that gets more attention than the student shot outside East High School. But we're seeing the legislature considering gun packages again, the size they haven't done since back in 2013, 10 years ago. Will they make it through? One or two might. I'm guessing David will be shooting down some of the logic on those bills. But people need to know Denver is safer than it was, but it's still not safe enough.
And it's not just Denver, right?
It's everywhere.
It's
If you look at Aurora, if you look at their crimes in the hinterlands of Colorado that are really appalling.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
right, David.
Crime goes up and down for lots of causes, but historically, Colorado has always had a lower overall violent crime rate than the United States until the past few years. In Colorado, a convicted violent criminal typically only serves 43% of his sentence. There was a bill in the legislature to change that. That got killed. The anti-gun jihad at the legislature has been enacting laws to crack down on peaceable citizens rather than on violent, dangerous people. And an example of that was just this week, where if you steal a gun right now in Colorado, that's just a petty offense. So there was a bill to increase that penalty. The governor supported it, and the majority in the committee killed it. So they're very tender in protecting violent gun criminals, but very aggressive in cracking down on the peaceable people.
And violent gun criminals in Colorado serve nearly double the sentence in the Department of Corrections. So there is an enhancement for a crime of violence. And so unlike, and I don't think there's any data or evidence that necessarily says that because of that, they are committing more gun crimes. So there's not, in my view, really a nexus between the two. Where there is a nexus is that this assault weapons, we know what is being used in the King Soopers shootings. We know what's being used in Club Q. We know what was used in Columbine. We know what was used in the Aurora Theater shooting. Okay, there's an actual nexus there.
And you think you ban those guns, then there's not going to be any more mass shootings. And people will just bring two handguns to it. This whole assault weapon thing is an example of something where people who don't understand guns are easily distracted. A so-called assault weapon fires at exactly the same rate as any common handgun. It's not more, and if you look at the power of the bullets, it's on the lower side compared to other rifles.
You know there's a difference between a handgun and an AR-15. Anyone who's been to a gun range and someone pulls out an AK-47 or an AR-15 and starts firing it down the line can just even sense and feel the power, those rounds and what they do to a human body and the efficiency with which they're able to do that.
This notion that the AR, the most popular rifle in American history, 20% of current gun sales, is some super powerful weapon is a flat out lie.
And if you're shooting that out of a hunting rifle, that's one thing, but if you're shooting that out of a 30-round extended clip or 100-round barrel out of an AR-15, it's not only the power, it's the efficiency and the accuracy. People who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a handgun can be deadly accurate with an AR-15 or similar weapon.
You're saying you don't like that. You think that a gun being accurate makes it something that should be higher on the list of what to ban.
I think that those guns that are that powerful need to be kept out of the hands of people who want to go out and do harm to children, who want to commit mass shootings. If we can figure out how to keep lawful guns out of the hands of people with unlawful intentions, then I think that's a step forward.
And
We agree on that one.
And this is being brought up again in the legislature, so there'll be more discussion. Eric, your thoughts?
My column runs under the heading of down the middle, and that's how I feel somewhat in this exchange, sitting here between my friends David and Tyrone. I think too often in this debate we get caught up into an either-or dichotomy. Either it's guns or it's punishment. Either it's gun control or it's mental health. Why can't it be all of the above? Yes, I think, to David's point, there has been a mood in Colorado policy over a few years of leaning towards lightening sentences, decriminalizing some crimes, etc. I think people who commit violent crimes should do their time, and that time should be extended. Guns are a part of the problem, but I also think we delude ourselves if we think they are the entire problem. What is going on in this country also indicates a degree of cultural rot, and if we don't address and somehow rectify that cultural rot, no amount of weapon control will ultimately do the trick.
And to add just one thing, when you have a 13-year-old who shoots and kills a 60-year-old on an RTD bus just because his leg is in the way, you have so many different problems you have to address.
Exactly.
It is time now for us to go around the table and talk about some highs and lows of the week. We've talked about some of the lows, but Patty, I'll start with you. That something disappointed you so that by the time we get to the end, we're ending on a positive note.
Well, I'll say it's disappointing, but it's also good. So on Sunday, we will mark the anniversary of when FDR sent Japanese Americans basically to concentration camps. But just yesterday, the Department of the Interior announced that Camp Amachi, which was the concentration camp for Japanese Americans here in southeastern Colorado, will become a National Historic Landmark.
The University of Colorado Law School, which made an enormous legal settlement with law professor Paul Campos because he complained that they were discriminating against him, and then the dean wrote in writing that she was retaliating against Campos for having complained about discriminating. Now, if you were not the dean of the University of Colorado Law School, but just an average person, lawyer passed the bar exam, you'd know that that's flagrantly illegal.
Well, I'm also going to the University of Colorado, but a different department up there, the Ethnic Studies Department. This is a couple weeks old, but it deserves some commentary. I'm no fan of that Ethnic Studies Department, and particularly the silly statement they put out in the aftermath of October 7th, which was an endorsement basically of Hamas and a completely one-sided statement. But as much as I despise that statement, I'm not a fan of doxing, and there's some liberal progressive group that's been going around Boulder with billboards on the side of a car or a truck with the home addresses, etc., of the Ethnic Studies Department members. That is an unnecessary escalation. These people are entitled to their free speech rights. They're entitled to their right to be wrong.
And my low is, I think, still a bit of a high because it is in recognition of a life well lived. Kevin Williams, who was a titan in disability rights law, passed this week. His relentless pursuit of justice and equality. I mean, he not only broke legal but physical barriers, and I think that his work will continue to live on and be really a testament to his legacy and power of advocacy.
Patty, something positive.
Well, Aurora has been dealing with a lot of growing pains, and they just hired Ginger White, who had been head of theaters and arenas in Denver, or I should say arts and venues. They've hired her to do cultural supervision. It'll be a great addition in that town.
Okay.
Well, the pro-Hamas mobs across the country have been engaged in these mini insurrections of preventing lawful legislative bodies from functioning. And so this week we had, for the third time, the pro-Hamas mob shutting down the Denver City Council. And happily, the Denver City Council stood up to this attack on democracy and rejected a pro-Hamas resolution.
I'm going to real quickly mention 3 Republicans. Norma Anderson, a woman of incredible courage, whatever becomes of that lawsuit, putting her name to it. Keith King, a legislator who passed away in the past couple of weeks, a true champion of school choice in this state. And lastly, Ken Buck for being that rare vote against the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas. Basically, Ken is a conservative Republican, but he says, show me the evidence, and the evidence wasn't there.
And a shout out to all of the Black History Month programming that's going on. I want to specifically shout out to right down the street, the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library, a very unique one to our city and county of Denver. They've got a lot of great programming. Go to their website and make sure you check it out before the end of the month.
Okay. My positives, I say positives too, because I have two colleagues in the broadcast industry that I want to give a shout out to. Channel 7 meteorologist Mike Nelson announced that he is retiring after more than 4 decades of forecasting and in recent years educating all of us on climate change and the effects to our Colorado weather. And how can we forget his fabulous tornado dance that he has brought to Colorado schools over the decades? Mike will be retiring in December. Now, leaving a little bit sooner from the local TV scene is Jenny Kavnar, who for the last 12 years covered the Rockies and was a TV host during games. Jenny is now headed to the Oakland A's to become the first woman to be a play-by-play announcer in Major League history. So congrats to her. Both Jenny and Mike show when you love what you do and you give it your all, good things happen, and those all around benefit from it. Thank you, panel, for joining us this week. Thank you for watching or listening on our podcast. I'm Kyle Dyer. I will see you next week here on PBS 12.
PBS 12 believes in the power of original, local programming. Help us bring more shows, like the one you just watched, by donating at pbs12.org/program support today.